I've been reviewing Cross comics for some months now, and within that time I've called them everything from good to bad to downright disgusting. But the one thing that I've never called a Cross comic book, until today, is boring. Cross Badlands Volume 1, aka Cross Volume 4 of The World and Its Becoming, shit name by the way, I don't know why they settled on that, follows a ragtag group of survivors as they try to outrun and outlast a horde of Crossed who stay viciously on their tail day and night, even through the harsh conditions of the ice-cold Scottish mountains. My apologies ahead of time for sounding like a negative Nancy throughout this video, but it is what it is. One of Volume 4's biggest problems is one that I anticipated before even glancing at the first page. The book is just too damn short for its own good. Coming in at a bite-sized 3 issues, 23 pages per issue, it is significantly shorter than its predecessors, who each had 32 pages per issue and more than double the amount of issues within their respective volumes. Before anyone says it, no, I'm not implying that the book simply being short is a problem. I'm fully aware that Badlands was created to be an anthology series of shorter than usual Cross stories. The problem is that I guess someone forgot to tell that to Garth Ennis, because he wrote the damn thing like he had all the time in the world. Which leads me into this book's second problem: uninteresting characters and stories. And I guess you could just say uninteresting in general. There isn't a single interesting thing about this book that I can think to name to you. The characters are all just generic caricatures, which is usually fine, but usually when we have generic caricatures, which is something that I expect in especially horror properties, they're at least saved by some good writing, some good jokes, just some interesting situations for them to be in order for us to buy into their characters and care about what happens to their characters, just at least to some extent. But none of that happens here, because the book literally goes first issue where we introduce all the characters, which is typical and expected. Second issue, nothing happens, still kind of introducing characters, okay, fine. Third issue, something does happen, but there's so little emphasis put into it, there's so little effort put into making it impactful that even though it is something big, it's still not interesting. It was a pregnancy, and in particular a failed pregnancy, where the only woman of the group, she's pregnant, and there's this whole interesting back and forth. Because, like I said when I was describing the plot, they are being chased by this big group of Cross people, right? So they've got to keep on the move, but with her being pregnant and expecting pretty much any day soon, she's slowing them down, and the Cross are catching up. They're like right on their tail. So they actually have this conversation to where they're like, should we, let her go her own way, because, if she keeps slowing us down, and then even when she has the baby, she's gonna slow us down even more. They're gonna catch up to us, and we're all gonna die. So it's like, should we leave her behind? And of course that in itself could have been interesting, because that's a very interesting situation to be in. But the way how the writing is done, it's too fast and too slow. The book is only 3 issues, like I said before, so the pacing is too slow for the length of the book. But for this particular situation, the pacing is a bit too fast, because before you know it, guess who's had a miscarriage, and guess who died with the baby? So problem solved, we can all just focus on the Cross all of a sudden, right? And the way how they reveal it, such a huge revelation, is like, oh, okay, let's just pack up our stuff and go. Nothing happened, right? And when we get into the final issue, I guess someone must have told Garth, hey, buddy, remember that classic little 9-issue run that we had earlier? Oh yeah, we've only got 3 issues, so today's gonna be your final issue. And he's like, oh shit, well, let's just skip straight to the finale. And literally at the start of the last issue, no build up. It doesn't show how they got caught. It doesn't show where they slipped up. It's just like, they got to Harry first. And then they just start picking off characters one by one by one by one until we've got the classic final guy character at the end, who also gets either killed or turned crossed, right? And it's just like there was no build up to it, because this entire time they've been keeping ahead of him. They've barely had to kill a single crossed person the whole 3-issue run, but then in the end, all of a sudden, they just kind of caught up to him. They just kind of got up there somehow, maybe, I don't know. The pacing is just way off for the entire book. Yeah, the book is too short, the pacing is too slow, nothing interesting really happens. The only interesting thing in this entire book is the character of Harry, or I guess we should call him Prince Harry, because there's this guy, his face is all messed up, and he's got bandages all over himself, and he's got all this like weaponry with him, like a sniper rifle and stuff, and he claims to be Prince Harry, right? And he's got like the brown blondish kind of hair, just like Prince Harry, right? But of course, no one can tell if he's actually Prince Harry since his face is all messed up. And he is the like literally throughout the entire book, the only interesting character. And it's because of this whole Prince Harry angle. Now, whether or not he's actually Prince Harry doesn't actually matter, but that is an interesting angle to take. It's an interesting thing. It's like, this post-apocalyptic world, somehow the prince ended up in the Scottish mountains with a bunch of random people, running away from zombies. That is interesting. But he gets picked off first. Like literally the first line of the 3rd issue, the final issue, they said they got to Harry first. And it's just them ripping this guy apart. And plus, they were building him up to be this badass, right? He was the badass sniper weapon guy of the group. And he gets picked off first like a complete bitch. Like, no build up to it. They don't show him picking guys off from a distance. They don't show him slipping up. They don't show him, getting any licks in. It just completely skips to him getting mauled. And that was completely uncool. They should have given my boy a better send-off than that, but just like everything else in the book, it's just ends up being all for nothing. So yeah, as far as positives about this book, I guess the artwork is okay. It starts off kind of rough in the 1st issue with these thicker than necessary lines, in my opinion. And I was kind of surprised. It's the same duo of Garth Ennis and Jason Burrows. Jason Burrows, I've seen his art, not just in Cross, but in other stuff, and I liked it. But for some reason, at least in the 1st issue of this volume, for some reason it just looked lower quality. For some reason, like the characters and stuff, and even the landscapes and stuff, they just didn't look as good as the previous times that he drew for Cross. And I don't know, maybe it was just because there was nothing interesting going on, so I was just kind of bored, and that just affected how I looked at the art or something. But it's fine. I don't just want to give this thing only criticisms. I'm trying to give it some positives here. So that's the best I can say for it. I'm sorry. So the art is fine, and I guess I'd have to say the character of Prince Harry, right? Because for the amount of time that he was in the book, he was interesting. He was, pretty mysterious, pretty badass kind of sounding guy. Unfortunately, he did not get a chance to put his money where his mouth was. He didn't get a chance to walk in those shoes and actually prove that he's a badass and have some badass moments. But it is what it is. So for the time that he was on screen, not being mauled, he was sounding like a pretty cool badass. So yeah, artwork and Prince Harry. But that is about it. Let's move into the final consensus. In conclusion, Crossed of the World in Its Becoming, still a shit name. It is the most boring, well, one of the most, if not the most boring comic book that I've ever read in my entire life, at least in recent memory. It baffles me as to how someone could read this 3-issue run and say, oh yeah, we're gonna print this one out. We're gonna do multiple copies of this one. This will introduce the new era of crossed comics. A 3-issue volume of complete nothingness. One thing that I never thought I'd call Cross was boring, but something that I absolutely, surprisingly, never ever thought in my entire life that I would ever call Garth freaking Ennis is boring. Bad? Sure. You know, edgelord? Yeah. At times, sure. But boring? Boring? Like, where does boring fit into that equation? Where does boring fit into that reality of Garth Ennis being who Garth Ennis is? How is he boring? I would love to ask him or someone who was around Avatar Comics during this time period here, because what is this? This is complete nothingness. And I know these guys are professionals. I know someone looked at this and they were like, this sucks, right? But they still made it anyway. It still had a run anyway. It still got printed anyway. Because this obviously sucks. I'm sorry. This is a terrible comic book. There's nothing interesting going on. It is super boring. The pacing is terrible. When it should be fast, it's slow, and when it should be slow, it's fast. The book is way too damn short for its own good. So, Crossed Volume 4, Crossed Badlands Volume 1, Cross of the World, and it's becoming whatever you want to call it, every name for it sucks, is a complete disappointment for me personally, because this is the duo of Garth Ennis and Jason Burrows, who wrote what I consider, at least being 4 volumes in, to be the best Crossed book so far, the best Cross volume so far, which is Cross Volume 1. So to see them write what is here now the second worst one, it was really surprising and a huge disappointment to me as a fan of that first book. So yeah, avoid this one at all costs. It is not as bad as Volume 3, because Volume 3 nothing can beat. This one sure gives it a run for its money. The revolting and disgusting nature of that book, but with being so damn boring. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to know when I upload next. This has been Fraser Talks, and I'll see you all next time. Please don't waste your time and read this book. God bless.